Let me tell you something a lot of men will never say out loud. Not because they don't feel it, but because they were raised to hide it. Men are taught to be strong, to lead, to provide, to fix things, to never look confused or uncertain. So when a man finds himself drawn to an older woman, there's something deeper happening than attraction. And that's what most people don't understand. What every man truly longs for from an older woman is peace. Not excitement, not drama, not chaos disguised as passion. Peace, the kind of peace that makes a man exhale when he walks into a room. The kind of peace where he doesn't have to perform, impress, or constantly prove his worth. An older woman understands that a man already fights enough battles outside. He doesn't want to come home to another one. A man may never say it out loud, but what he truly longs for is peace, not the absence of passion or excitement, but the absence of unnecessary emotional noise. The kind of peace that allows him to breathe when he walks into a room, where he doesn't have to brace himself for tension, arguments, or emotional tests. His world already demands constant effort, decision-making, and pressure. Every day he is expected to be strong, to solve problems, to carry responsibility without complaint. When he connects with an older woman, what draws him in is the feeling that he doesn't have to stay in battle mode all the time. Peace means he doesn't have to perform, he doesn't have to impress, explain, or defend himself. He can sit quietly and just exist without being questioned about his silence or accused of emotional distance. An older woman understands that silence can be reflection, not rejection. She doesn't rush to fill every pause with suspicion or insecurity. That understanding creates a space where he feels respected rather than managed. Peace also means emotional stability. He isn't walking on eggshells, unsure of which version of her he will encounter today. Her reactions are grounded, not impulsive. She doesn't turn minor misunderstandings into major conflicts. She knows when something deserves attention and when it deserves patience. That steadiness reassures him in ways he rarely articulates. It makes him trust that he can bring his full self without fear of emotional backlash. What a man longs for is a relationship that feels like refuge instead of resistance. The world outside can be loud, competitive, and unforgiving. With her, things slow down. He can let his guard down because he knows he won't be attacked for being vulnerable. Peace shows up in the way she listens without interrupting, in the way she responds instead of reacts, and in the way she chooses understanding over winning an argument. There is also peace in not being constantly tested. He doesn't have to prove his loyalty, his love, or his intentions over and over again. An older woman doesn't need constant reassurance because she trusts herself first. That self-trust spills into the relationship, allowing him to feel trusted as well. When a man feels trusted, he naturally becomes more present, more committed, more open. Peace means no emotional games, no deliberate distance to provoke a reaction, no jealousy tactics meant to create insecurity, no silent treatments designed to punish. He experiences honesty instead of manipulation, clarity instead of confusion. That kind of emotional environment feels rare to a man who has spent years navigating unpredictable emotional landscapes. He also finds peace in her ability to see the bigger picture. She doesn't let temporary emotions dictate long-term decisions. She understands that bad days don't define good relationships. She knows that love isn't about constant excitement, but about consistent calm. That wisdom allows him to relax into the connection instead of constantly preparing for the next emotional storm. In her presence, he He feels regulated rather than drained. His nervous system settles. His mind quiets. He becomes more thoughtful, more grounded, more himself. That peace doesn't make him weak, it strengthens him. It gives him the emotional stability to show up better in every area of his life. And once a man experiences a love that feels peaceful instead of chaotic, his heart quietly recognizes the difference and holds onto it. What draws a man deeply toward an older woman is her emotional maturity and the calm presence that comes with it. Emotional maturity is not about age alone, but about experience, reflection, and self-awareness. It shows in how she handles conflict, how she expresses her feelings, and how she holds space for someone else's emotions without making them her enemy. A man senses this maturity almost immediately, and it creates a level of comfort he rarely finds elsewhere. Her calm presence doesn't demand constant attention or reassurance. She doesn't need to be the center of every moment to feel valued. She knows her worth, so she doesn't panic when life gets busy or when emotions fluctuate. That steadiness allows a man to relax instead of feeling pressured to constantly prove himself. He can focus on connection rather than damage control. Emotional maturity shows in her ability to pause before reacting. She doesn't let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. When something upsets her, she communicates instead of exploding. When she's hurt, she explains instead of attacking. This measured response makes a man feel safe enough to be honest, because he knows honesty won't be met with chaos or punishment. A calm presence also means she understands timing. She knows when to talk and when to give space. She recognizes that some conversations need patience, not urgency. A man appreciates this more than he admits, because he often processes internally before speaking. With her, he doesn't feel rushed to respond or pressured to resolve everything instantly. That respect for his rhythm deepens trust. Her emotional maturity allows her to separate intention from outcome. She understands that a mistake doesn't always mean disrespect, and silence doesn't always mean disinterest. Instead of assuming the worst, she asks questions. Instead of creating stories in her head, she seeks clarity. This approach reduces unnecessary conflict and keeps the connection grounded in reality rather than fear. There's also a sense of accountability in her maturity. She can acknowledge when she's wrong without turning it into a power struggle. She doesn't weaponize tears or emotions to control the situation. When she apologizes, it's sincere, not strategic. That honesty earns a man's respect, because he knows he's dealing with someone emotionally responsible. Her calm presence extends beyond words. It's in her body language, her tone, and the way she holds herself. She doesn't fidget with insecurity or scan the room for validation. She is comfortable in her own skin, and that comfort is contagious. A man feels more grounded simply being around her, as if her energy regulates his own. This emotional steadiness makes her a safe place. He can bring his stress, his doubts, and his unfinished thoughts without fear of judgment. She doesn't try to fix him or rush him. She listens, understands, and allows him to arrive at his own clarity. That kind of support builds a deep emotional bond because it respects his autonomy while offering presence. In her calm, He learns that love doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't have to hurt to be passionate. Emotional maturity teaches him that consistency is more powerful than intensity. With her, he experiences a relationship that feels balanced, thoughtful, and emotionally intelligent, and that experience reshapes what he believes. Love can feel like what quietly captures a man's attention is her confidence and self-assurance, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It's not built on compliments or external approval, but on years of knowing herself, making mistakes, and learning from them. This confidence creates a sense of stability that a man finds deeply attractive because it removes the pressure to constantly reassure or validate. He feels like he can simply show up as he is without being responsible for holding her sense of worth together. Her self-assurance shows in how she moves through the world. She doesn't rush to compare herself to others or feel threatened by younger women, different personalities, or shifting dynamics. She understands that her value doesn't decrease just because someone else exists. That calm certainty makes a man feel secure rather than defensive. He doesn't feel like he has to compete with her insecurities or constantly prove his commitment. A confident woman sets boundaries without guilt. She knows what she will and won't tolerate, and she communicates it clearly. This clarity helps a man understand where he stands. Instead of guessing or navigating emotional landmines, he can engage with honesty. Boundaries don't push him away, they guide him. They show him that the connection is rooted in self-respect rather than fear of loss. Her confidence also means she doesn't chase. She invites. She allows space without interpreting it as rejection. If a man pulls back to think, she doesn't panic or pursue him with demands. She trusts that if the connection is real, it will find its way back. That trust gives him room to breathe and often draws him closer rather than farther away. Self-assurance changes how she handles disagreement. She doesn't collapse or become aggressive when challenged. She can hold her perspective without needing to dominate the conversation. She listens, considers, and responds thoughtfully. This balanced approach makes conflict feel manageable instead of threatening. A man feels like he can speak freely without triggering defensiveness or emotional shutdowns. There is strength in how she values herself without arrogance. She doesn't diminish herself to make a man feel bigger, nor does she try to overpower him. She stands firmly in her own worth and allows him to do the same. This creates mutual respect rather than a power struggle. He feels partnered with her, not measured against her. Her confidence allows her to enjoy a man rather than need him. She wants companionship, connection, and intimacy, but her happiness doesn't depend on his constant presence. This independence removes emotional pressure. A man feels chosen rather than required. Being chosen feels far more meaningful than being needed, because it's rooted in desire rather than dependency. Self-assurance also means she isn't afraid of being alone. She knows she can walk away from situations that don't honor her. This quiet willingness to let go, if necessary, makes her presence more valuable. A man senses that she is with him because she wants to be, not because she's afraid to leave. That awareness deepens his respect and investment. Her confidence creates emotional safety. He doesn't feel like one mistake will shatter the connection. He doesn't fear that honesty will destabilize everything. With her, the foundation feels solid. That solidity encourages him to show up more authentically, to open up, and to commit more fully because he trusts the ground. Beneath the relationship, what a man deeply respects, even if he rarely admits it, is her honesty and direct communication. This kind of honesty is not harsh or careless, but clear, grounded, and free of hidden agendas. An older woman understands that clarity saves time, energy, and emotional confusion. She doesn't expect a man to read between the lines or decode emotional puzzles. She says what she feels, what she wants, and what she expects without wrapping it in manipulation or silence. Direct communication creates relief for a man. He doesn't have to guess why her mood has changed or wonder what he did wrong 3 days ago. If something bothers her, she addresses it calmly instead of storing it for later explosions. This approach allows him to stay present rather than defensive. When communication is clear, misunderstandings lose their power to damage the connection. Honesty also means consistency. Her words match her action. She doesn't say one thing and do another, and she doesn't use ambiguity as a tool to control behavior. A man finds security in this alignment because it makes the relationship predictable in the healthiest way. Predictability here doesn't mean boring. It means emotionally safe. There is strength in how she expresses boundaries through communication. She doesn't threaten, withdraw, or manipulate to be heard. She states her limits directly and trusts that they will be respected. This gives a man a clear framework for how to show up. Instead of feeling trapped by unspoken expectations, he understands exactly what matters to her. Her honesty also allows space for truth on his side. When he knows he won't be punished for speaking openly, he becomes more willing to share his thoughts and emotions. Direct communication invites reciprocity. It teaches him that vulnerability won't be met with ridicule or emotional retaliation. That mutual openness deepens trust over time. An older woman understands that timing matters. She doesn't bring up heavy topics in moments of heightened emotion just to release tension. She chooses moments when both people can listen rather than react. This awareness makes communication productive instead of destructive. A man appreciates this more than he often realizes because it makes conversations feel purposeful rather than exhausting. Honesty also shows up in how she gives feedback. She doesn't attack his character or diminish his efforts. She speaks about behaviors, not identities. This distinction allows him to hear her without feeling personally diminished. Constructive honesty motivates growth instead of creating shame. Direct communication removes the need for emotional games. She doesn't test him with silence, jealousy, or mixed signals. She doesn't use confusion to maintain power. This straightforwardness creates a sense of partnership rather than competition. A man feels like he's on the same team with her, working toward understanding rather than survival. There is also honesty in how she expresses affection. She doesn't withhold warmth to maintain control, nor does she exaggerate emotions to create attachment. Her expressions are genuine and proportionate to the moment. This authenticity makes affection feel real instead of transactional. Over time, this style of communication reshapes how a man experiences relationships. He begins to associate love with clarity rather than confusion, safety rather than tension. He learns that connection doesn't require mind games or emotional gymnastics. With her, communication becomes a bridge instead of a battlefield, and that changes how deeply he can attach and how fully he can remain present within the relationship. What a man quietly craves is acceptance without judgment or conditions. a feeling that he can be himself without constantly being evaluated, corrected, or measured against expectations he never agreed to. Much of a man's life is spent proving something, proving strength, competence, value, and worth. From a young age, he learns that love is often tied to performance, that approval comes after success, and that mistakes cost him respect. When he encounters an older woman who accepts him as he is, it feels unfamiliar in the most powerful way. Acceptance means she doesn't shame him for his flaws. She understands that imperfections are not failures but parts of being human. She doesn't use his weaknesses as weapons during conflict or reminders of why he falls short. Instead of asking why he isn't more, she recognizes what he already is. That recognition allows him to relax instead of constantly guarding himself. A man longs to be accepted emotionally, to have his feelings acknowledged without being minimized or mocked. When he's quiet, she doesn't accuse him of being distant. When he's overwhelmed, she doesn't label him weak. She understands that men express stress and emotion differently, and she allows him to process in his own way. That permission creates emotional safety, something many men rarely experience. Acceptance without conditions also means she doesn't threaten the relationship every time there's disagreement. Love isn't held hostage to compliance. He doesn't feel like one wrong move will result in withdrawal, punishment, or abandonment. This consistency reassures him that the connection is stable, not fragile. Stability allows him to invest emotionally without fear. There is also acceptance of his past. An older woman understands that life leaves marks. She doesn't interrogate his history or compete with it. She doesn't demand that he erase who he was to become worthy of who she is. She sees his past as part of his growth, not something to hold against him. That perspective frees him from carrying guilt into the present. A man deeply values being accepted without constant attempts to change him. Encouragement feels different from control. She doesn't try to remodel his personality, habits, or interests to fit her ideal version of a partner. She trusts that growth happens naturally when someone feels supported rather than pressured. That trust often inspires him to improve on his own terms. Acceptance also shows up in how she handles his ambitions and limitations. She doesn't belittle his dreams, even if they seem unrealistic. She doesn't measure his worth solely by achievements or status. She believes in him without attaching love to outcomes. That belief strengthens his confidence because it's not conditional on success. There is comfort in knowing he doesn't have to earn her affection daily. He doesn't have to constantly impress, entertain, or outperform others to remain valued. Being accepted means he is enough in the present moment, not just in some future version of himself. This feeling of enoughness is rare for man, and when he finds it, it settles deep within him. Acceptance without judgment allows him to be vulnerable. He can admit fear, confusion, or failure without losing respect. He can reveal parts of himself he usually hides from the world. That vulnerability deepens intimacy because it's rooted in authenticity rather than image. Over time, this unconditional acceptance changes how a man shows up. He becomes more open, more affectionate, and more emotionally available. He gives more because he feels safe doing so. When love is not conditional, effort becomes genuine rather than forced. And connection becomes something he chooses every day rather than something he fears losing. What truly draws a man toward an older woman is the way She understands him without trying to change him. This kind of understanding doesn't come from assumptions or control, but from observation, patience, and emotional intelligence. She watches who he is rather than who she wants him to become. She listens not just to his words, but to his patterns, his silences, and the things he avoids saying. That level of understanding makes him feel seen rather than managed. A man often feels misunderstood in relationships because his actions are interpreted through fear or expectation. An older woman recognizes that behavior has context. She understands that his need for space is not rejection, that his quiet moments are not emotional absence, and that his focus on work or goals is often an expression of care rather than neglect. By understanding his rhythm, she removes unnecessary tension from the connection. She doesn't rush to label or diagnose him. Instead of telling him what he should feel, she allows him to discover it himself. This patience gives him the freedom to grow at his own pace. Growth feels natural rather than forced. When a man isn't pressured to change, he becomes more open to reflection and improvement on his own terms. Understanding without trying to change also means she respects his individuality. She doesn't attempt to reshape his personality, interests, or habits to fit her preferences. She accepts that he has his own way of processing life. This respect makes him feel valued for who he already is, not for who he could be if he adjusted himself to meet someone else's expectations. There is comfort in knowing that he doesn't have to constantly defend himself. He doesn't need to justify every decision or explain every emotional response. She trusts his intentions unless given a reason not to. That trust creates a foundation where communication flows more easily and defensiveness fades away. An older woman understands that men often express love through actions rather than words. She notices the effort, the consistency, and the quiet ways he shows up. She doesn't dismiss these gestures because they don't match a specific emotional script. By recognizing his language of love, she allows him to feel appreciated without having to become someone he isn't. She also understands his fears without amplifying them. She doesn't exploit vulnerabilities to gain control or reassurance. When he opens up, she holds his truth with care rather than judgment. This response teaches him that vulnerability is safe, not dangerous. Over time, he becomes more willing to share parts of himself he usually keeps guarded. Understanding without trying to change him doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or unhealthy behavior. It means distinguishing between growth and control. She sets boundaries without trying to rewrite his identity. She communicates her needs clearly while allowing him to decide how to meet them. This balance creates mutual respect instead of resentment. A man feels deeply connected to someone who allows him to be authentic. When he doesn't feel pressured to perform or evolve on a forced timeline, he naturally becomes more present and engaged. He invests more emotionally because the connection feels supportive rather than restrictive. In a world that constantly tells men who they should be, finding someone who accepts who they are is rare. That kind of understanding creates loyalty, trust, and emotional intimacy that grows over time. It becomes a space where both people can exist fully without losing themselves. That is the kind of connection a man holds on to long after everything else fades.